Hello and welcome to this new forest talk. So this one is going to be about Elden Ring, and this time I'm actually testing out my mic I'm using for the moment talks. So I'm gonna test it out and see how the audio quality is with regards to this, if it's any better or not. And I'm having here my headphones on a bit to see like how it sounds like, if it's good. So I'm, well, in that sense, picking myself up better. Let me just see here. Yeah, okay, it's all good. So yeah, that intro aside, Elden Ring. So I kind of have something to say before I dive into Elden Ring regarding to a dream that I had last night. I kind of feel that dream, I don't know, it's an important dream and it's connected in some sense to what I'm going to talk about here in the Elden Ring video. And well, the dream is kind of as follows. So in the dream, well, it was styled in like a Western type setting, and I was in that dream. There was like a woman with long brown hair that called herself the daughter. Well, she hired me to find a figure called the father, and I was supposed to go there to some village or something, through some like desert and valley to get there to the father, and then to unite the two. And then while going to the village, there was this female figure on a dark horse. She had like black hair, long black hair, and like dark eyes. And she was there on the horse, and then she was shooting at me like 3 times at least. Then I was just thinking to myself like, well, fuck this bullshit. I don't have time for this. So I shot her like, bow, boom, right in her face, and she just like dropped onto the, well, she dropped off her horse, dead. And then I continued, and then I reunited like the father and the daughter, and yeah, I don't know. I personally think that this figure, because it later turned out in the dream that figure that I had shot was the daughter's mother in the dream. So I kind of feel like that the daughter was like Anima. The figure that I shot was like a negative mother complex, and then the father was like the wise old man. He had like white hair and a long white beard, and yeah, I kind of feel like that kind of was going on in that dream, and I surprisingly felt much lighter after. I don't know, the shooting her in the face part kind of was funny, even though in like now, but even though in the dream I kind of felt awkward. But yeah, there is this like negative anima aspect in it, and there's also in the Elden Ring story that I'm going to talk about. I kind of felt like bringing this dream up because I personally feel that going into this material that I had written down here about Elden Ring kind of also really helped me to I guess deal with it by reading so much about Elden Ring, but also like about the anima, the negative aspect of the anima, and the anima herself, and different figures, and it kind of helped me to put it together in a different, like, I guess, framework, so that I can then I don't know, I could maybe my subconscious could do something with it. and maybe I don't know, like me talking about this might put it for you, like Elden Ring in a perspective where I don't know, maybe it puts it into a different light, and then you well, you don't I don't know, like it would help you in some sense, put it in that perspective, and maybe it will help you like it helped me. Who knows? Maybe it just gives you a cool new perspective on Elden Ring. So Elden Ring. So I'm gonna talk there a bit more in the context of well, a Jungian view on it, like well the title of the video said, and also kind of well dealing with it from a more personal, I guess, lens, because I'm gonna like take the story and take it from the collective level and put it down to the personal level. So seeing it from that lens. So before we then actually like get into it, and I've here like written down quite a few notes, and yeah, and I'm gonna have some like images in the video, so that's gonna pop up, so that you have well some kind of like idea like who I'm talking about, and the imagery would kind of also speak for itself in that sense. So I hope that would be helpful, this new approach. So yeah, so let's get into this, to keep it, I guess, above or away from the mic, so it doesn't muffle it, because it was like muffling it like this. You can hear it now, so it's good that I can. But yeah, so have you written down the Erdtree? Well, I mean, the first thing what is obvious about the Erdtree is like Yggdrasil, the world tree. You know, I had seen the video made by Max Dera on Elden Ring, and he pointed that out immediately, and it's kind of also what I had seen myself. It's like definitely world tree symbology right there. And in Jungian terms, the world tree can be seen as a symbol of the self. So it's why it's in the center, in that sense. And it towers over everything. It's in the center, and then you have the and it's a symbol of the self. It's one of the many symbols of the self, really. And yeah, so that's well, firstly, really like what that already is. So I've here then also written on some other notes that I had written down from going through a lot of the lore. So if you haven't seen it yet in the title, there's going to be massive spoilers in this video. So I'm going to basically spoil the entire story from that sense. So if you feel like you don't want that, click off and maybe play the game and like I don't know, like watch this afterwards. Maybe it also will make more sense to you then if you have played it a bit and immerse yourself into it, that it would make some sense. But now getting into the story. So, I had written down here, the Elden Ring is an immensely powerful object, integral to the existence of the lands between. The ring itself exists within Marika's own body. It is the physical manifestation of the Golden Order brought by the Greater Will. So in that sense, the land between is the unconscious in this concept. And the ring being made from many great runes, ranging from death to even order, and in the game, it's kind of a representation of that thing within the Anima, which is the symbol making function, because that's kind of like the a part of the purpose, kind of what she has, or like the relating function has, how it's called, just kind of like both, in a way, Anima and Animus. And Anima is kind of more related to, I guess, the life force, and then the ring is the meaning, making the symbol, making function of it, and it's kind of like how you relate to the world, like the symbols that you project onto the world. I guess the Buddhists would link this to, like, I guess, Maya, and kind of like seeing the world through, I guess, a certain sense of like certain symbols that get projected onto different things, like this is a twig, this is a pine cone, stuff like that, but also like on a larger context, things being projected and onto certain things. But that's I guess like yeah, just one thing of that. But maybe like I said in the Sun Wukong video, like maybe I'm not gonna get into Buddhism too much yet. But yeah, so you know so a bit about the Anima, so you kind of understand that in the context of the game also. So the Anima as messenger and symbol making source allows for communication between ego and self. So it connects both kind of to each other, and also to the kind of the unconscious itself too. And you know, and in that sense, the grace that you see in the world, within that world, in that game, is really something more akin to like some form of like life force energy. You could see it in the sense of the Anima that she extends via the ring and its connection to the self, to the ego. But I'll get a bit later into all of that stuff. So the self, with that regard, with it being something that is more, well, outward, so something outside of it, and then the Erdtree being like a physical manifestation of the self in that sense, with the ring connected to it as its like power source, and like connection source in that sense too. Well, it actually makes sense, because you know, like what I've also written down here, the self is and can be something alien to the ego due to its vast scope and nature beyond dualities. It's something like we can't really grasp, and it's like it seems like more like something more out there, especially from like the ego's perspective, especially like when not connected to the self. So you know, in that sense, I would personally say that the Elden Lord that sits on the throne kind of represents the ego connected to the self, as where maybe the Tarnished is in that sense the ego disconnected from the self, or not like connect, or not there yet. You know, and then him sitting on the throne, he has then the Anima as consort. You know, in that sense, and then you have the different Tarnished champions in this state of internal chaos. What I have here written represent internal competing ego structures, though the Tarnished represents the true ego in the game. So the protagonist, as is seen through his connection to Melina as Anima and daughter of Marika, and the spectral steed, as in the story of Sun Wukong. This can be seen as a reference to the body. And in that story of Sun Wukong, it represents the connection to the body in that story. So I don't know. I personally would see it in a similar light. Probably just not something that the developers had in mind, maybe. Probably not, but it's like a personal thing. So I mean, leave it for what it is. If yeah, it's kind of more like a, I guess, personal side note. So now coming to some all of the basics of the story. So Marika is the Anima in Jungian terms. Radagon is the Animus. Both make up the relating function. So that's why they're connected in one, because kind of really they're the same thing, but different aspects of the same thing. It's just kind of connected to the ring. If that makes sense. And Maliketh is the shadow. So yeah, so he represents the shadow, and the shadow in that sense is that what, well, we're kind of in that sense it contains a lot of repressed material, and it kind of like later will make a lot of sense with regarding to something that Marika does in the story. But first about also that I had written down, Marika in the story is a numen, meaning spiritual force or divinity in I think it is Latin. So there's immediately there already kind of like connection with the Anima, because often it is represented in mythology as a kind of like a goddess figure, and there's often this link, even though like it would be misguided, I guess, to see it in such light, and in like, I guess, like in inner sense of it as that, because it's more like the relating function. So like the way we relate to the world and what kind of we project on it, kind of with the shadow too. It's a different aspect of it connected to it, because it's like the symbol making function is kind of there, what it comes from, and there are certain things repressed in the shadow as kind of like it's still connected to it. So like in the game too. So now comes to the part here, what I have written down. Marika as Anima removed the rune of death and hid it with her shadow, which is the repression of it into the shadow. Her motivation seems to be a disillusionment with the self, so greater will in the game. Upon discovering, it is not entirely benevolent. And then that's kind of one thing about the self. It is that the self is not, like Jung also pointed out, entirely benevolent in that sense. Like it contains both good and evil. It contains both yin and yang, order and chaos. It contains both. So it's not just, I guess, just this force of order, and that's it's something I'm gonna like point out later in the game, like kind of what I feel like kind of happened in like psychological terms, if this would be a person. So and here's a I guess also a very important part, and it's kind of like, like to the degree that if you repress something into the shadow, there it will come back and bite you in the ass at some later point. It can, and and the self kind of also wants this to be resolved, because it wants to kind of restore the proper order in that sense. So and then in that sense, the event called Night of Black Knives can in this slide be seen as that what had been repressed into the shadow coming back to light, maybe a representation of a traumatic event. The first to fall is Godwin the Golden, representing the archetype of the hero. The one behind this being Ranni, which, as Max Dera in his video pointed out correctly, as Hel, the Norse goddess, as she represents the negative pole of the Anima, bringing back with her death and creating hence the event called the Shattering. And it's kind of like in that sense, you have here Marika as the Anima repressing death, the rune of death, within the shadow. Ranni kind of, in that sense, I would see like Ranni being something that's split off from the Anima, becoming like a negative pole of the Anima, and this kind of bringing back the essence of death, and this needing to be integrated in that sense. And that's kind of what needs to happen, and for the hero archetype, well, it cannot really deal with death that well. And I have a video on this as well, on the hero archetype, and I can put it in the description of this video, and you can then check it out, and then also really see what it is all about. So you can really like look into that if you're interested in that, to see it more in like a deeper perspective, more wider perspective in that sense. Really, what this is about, and what like the dragon in that sense is about too, in a wider sense. Ranni, I also wrote here, might be the representation of what Marika tried to deny in herself. Marika shattering the Elden Ring then caused both her and Radagon to be absorbed into the Erdtree, so the self, causing the spectral Melina to be born, with also Ranni being spectral. And the various demigods represent different complexes and archetypes. And then Gottfried representing the old ego that lost the grace from the self. He did in the story. And then, in that sense, his son kind of represents the hero archetype. And they're kind of both linked in that sense, that it's like a representation of the hero archetype. And then the Tarnished is the potential new Elden Lord, and as ego goes to face the chaos, complexes and rogue archetypes to restore order. Melina and Ranni both represent a split Anima. So there's a split due to like some traumatic event or something happening in that sense, like the person's psyche, to cause this kind of split. And it's quite, I guess, common in that sense that something like that then happens, but it doesn't need to be resolved in that sense. Melina is I wrote here, the positive pole and maiden form, which is very common for with regards to the hero archetype, like the hero, maiden, archetypes that they're connected. Ego being the hero, and the Anima, the maiden. Ranni is the negative pole and witch form. So she kind of represents that the negative pole of it. You can later then also see like kind of why that is. I'll explain it in a bit. But also he wrote, the grace that the Elden Lord Tarnished might get depending on the ending is the vital life force energy from the self. Marika was the one initially taking away the grace from the Tarnished. Yeah, so then both Melina and Ranni are spectral because the life force energy has been reabsorbed together with Marika into the Erdtree after the shattering of the ring. And it's kind of something kind of that push the Anima like further inward. So she represents herself in this like more spectral form, in this spectral like split form, because of what happened with regards to the shattering. Now, as I have here written down, the anima in real life can take away life force energy if traumatized or if one treats those aspects of oneself badly. The runes are turned into strength by Melina for the Tarnished. And that's kind of also a very interesting aspect right there too, because here I had written down as one of the notes, let me see here, this could represent the absorption of gnosis from anima to the ego, and it's something that kind of starts happening with regarding to the what happens on the journey of individuation, in that sense, when you start working through the projections of the anima, to kind of like absorb those great runes, in that sense, the gnosis, and that kind of in that sense that reabsorbs like some of that life force energy back into the ego, or at least connects the ego to it in that sense, and kind of like these demigods and these dragons and other monsters kind of that you face, that and the souls that you get from it, that it kind of brings you that life force energy back. So it's kind of like like a reabsorption of that kind of energy back into the Tarnished on the journey to the world tree, which is the self. You know, and there's here also something like interesting is Melanie wants to, or Melina Melina wants to restore the rune of death, to restore mortality, because she seems to be wanting to restore mortality to the realm. To integrate it, kind of in that sense, to integrate it back into the whole, restore the ring, all depending on the ending, and connect back to the self, well, or not. It really depends on the ending that you get. And you know, that's kind of what Melina then seems to make possible. I also have here written down, this could mean to go beyond the archetype of the hero. Jung, by the way, killed off this hero archetype, and he did within his active imagination. At some point, he just killed off the hero archetype and kind of went beyond it. And it's something, I guess, I don't know, I don't think it's been talked about much. But he did do it, and he moved beyond it. And I kind of feel like in the story that there's something like that kind of going on. And I kind of feel like maybe that death needed to be reintegrated into that sense, into the subconscious, so it can be properly, like, I guess, dealt with. So you can go beyond the hero archetype and sit on the throne as like a kind of like king archetype. So beyond the hero archetype. Now I kind of have written that down here already. Yeah, too. So one of my notes. And I think also there's something very interesting here with this also, and that is Radagon is the one blocking the entrance with thorns to preserve the old order, but really keeping the world in a state of disarray. Maybe this world represents an unconscious of someone who has undergone something traumatic, I have written down, fracturing the anima, so Marika, leaving her in this fractured state, like in the body form, but then also in the form of this split between Melina and Ranni. And also I've written down, Radagon being the old structure that needs to be overcome. So he kind of represents the old, I guess, decaying meaning structure. That's why he's in this kind of, well, decaying form also. And it's very, I guess, still old and rigid, and needs to be overcome so that you can, like, move beyond it and set a new order in of its place. Or at least try to. You know, it depends on the ending, really, what this order, what it is. But that's up to the player to decide in this game, kind of like what route you want to go towards. And I've also written down something here about some different endings, and kind of of the of the game too, and like kind of in that sense what I think, what it means. But one thing that I do want to like highlight still also here is about this particular ending and about this particular figure. Just if you follow Ranni, I wrote here, this would mean to leave the world as it is, so not to restore the ring. So that's kind of like, well, in that sense, it's kind of like not integrating it, and like Ranni representing the negative pole. Well, it really is in that sense then, well, yeah, the negative pole, and it leads to, well, not something good in the real sense. If you would talk about the negative anima, it would just, I guess, leech of the life force energy and take it for itself in some sense. And it doesn't do the ego any good in the mix. In that sense, the ego going away with her kind of makes sense, because the ego becomes kind of like powerless in that sense, cannot act within it anymore. So the ending kind of makes sense, like the ending called the Age of Stars. I mean, in the game, Ranni says, "I am Ranni, the witch. I stole death long ago, and search now for the dark path." For me, the Age of Order ending that I've written down here is the best ending, and I want to really go into that a bit more here. I wrote here down also from what I've seen in the lore, as it restores the Erdtree, and also ends really in the Jungian sense shadow projection. And I kind of feel like it's like a proper integration of everything, and restores everything to like a better order. As I want to like highlight here like what Goldmask said in the game. All the good and the great in their foolishness is an absolute evil to contend with, implying that one who seeks greater power to further his or her ambition in all likelihood presents himself or herself as the greater good, and condemn the other side as absolute evil. Each will accuse the other as committing heresy. Strife would ensue, plunging the lands between into chaos and unending conflicts. And that's something which this ending seeks to prevent. And in that sense, I kind of feel like that ending kind of, well, and kind of what the Gold Mask tries to highlight is kind of like the essence of shadow projection. And shadow projection is also something that well, it is also something that is in the game itself. I think it is like a kind of a curse or something like that, from what I remember, that you can put on someone else, that they see their enemy in someone who's not actually their enemy, and they start attacking them as if they're their foe. And yeah, this ending kind of seeks to prevent this, so that a kind of this age of strife and shadow projection ends, and like the proper order of the greater will kind of is restored. Which includes the death rune, and I think it includes the death rune, maybe, from what I remember, or was it the rune of perfect order or good order or something like that to put instead into it, or maybe with into it. I don't really recall that detail, but it's about restoring it and kind of like going beyond like the I guess the normal duality, because there is this thing kind of happening in it, because you have like those twins that are very like, I guess, the Omen twins that were like shunned in some sense. So that's kind of like I guess a repression of something into the shadow in of itself too. Which kind of like, yeah, it kind of actually shows like not like a proper order in that sense. So maybe it's kind of related to like the death being put aside too, and this it kind of needed to be like in well, yeah, reintegrated into some sense. So you to go beyond it. To not kind of think that certain parts are of oneself that one projects outwardly or something are like pure evil, that you can kind of see beyond it and kind of have this kind of understanding of, I guess, compassion in one hand, but also like on the other hand not enabling it either. So yeah, and then I have here also something about the Frenzied Flame ending. And I've written that I wrote here, I see the frenzied flame ending as giving into nihilism and depression. Because what really stood out to me is kind of what the frenzied flame said. And it kind of sees it as this. According to the frenzied flame, life itself is the source of suffering. And those who were born to suffer wish that they were never born. It's kind of very nihilistic and self... well, defeating in that sense. It kind of makes sense why in this ending the Tarnished burns down the Erdtree completely. It's like, it just makes total fucking sense why he does that in that ending, because he kind of gives into that kind of nihilistic sense. So it's a very dark ending in that sense. Yeah, but really in the end, what this game seems to represent, well, is the journey of the ego to the self. So individuation. You go on this journey and you fight these complexes, the dragons, the monsters, the giants. The giants can be kind of seen as like one world, like desires or complexes in some sense, like Cyclops in that sense is that, but also like a giant is something like that, and yeah, and these different monsters and these different things that you face are kind of like different things you face, and then especially with the demigods and those bosses that you fight and the runes that, with it, that you kind of like absorb that as strength. It's kind of like absorbing a certain essence or knowledge of the shadow aspects into yourself, like an awareness of it, so you can like integrate it into a proper manner, so it doesn't control you anymore. So kind of that's kind of what's kind of happening. I see in in the story of Elden Ring, and then in the end you face Godwyn, like the first Elden Lord, and you defeat him. Kind of the old structure, the old ego structure gets defeated in that sense, because he cannot defeat that what kind of is beyond death. Because that's the interesting about it too, that the Tarnished in the very beginning died and then has been brought back by grace. So he went through it kind of in that sense, and he then tries to. That's why he succeeds in the end. Why in the story kind of, and why the other Tarnished champions don't. Their other different variations of kind of like the different structures, but they fail to kind of like die and go beyond death and deal with it. So that is something that like the hero kind of needs to deal with in the hero's journey at some point to go beyond death and face this. And then I have here lastly also written down Melina sacrificing herself as Anima to fulfill her purpose. I personally see as her coming to the end of her journey. I actually fulfilled her journey to bring the ego, the Tarnished, to the self, and that's kind of like all that needed to happen in that sense, and she needed to like remove the thorns that Radagon put there, so that she could then allow that like old order to be overthrown in some sense, so that then it can be maybe in some sense updated. The old self needs to die. It's kind of also something that needs to happen in the story of individuation, or like in individuation itself. There comes a point where the ego needs to surrender itself to the self and kind of die for a new ego to kind of be reborn. And I kind of feel like that's kind of symbolically happening in that sense. Yeah. And I don't know, the final stage, I kind of also when she like in individuation you kind of then have like the hero Anima syzygy moving together to I guess like connect to the self in individuation, even though like it's represented a bit differently in the game, but I mean that's just I guess just it's a game and a story, so it's like it just makes sense in the story like that. So it's like in that sense it just makes sense in the story wise, and it's not completely following individuation to a perfect T either. I would think there's like a hero journeys element in it too, and different elements to it, and different elements incorporated into it that just go beyond individuation too, from like Max Zera pointed out, Norse mythology, but also probably different other aspects. So, but this is like one, I guess, perspective in that sense of it that is in it. So yeah, and I don't know, leading back to like the dream that I was talking about in the beginning, it was kind of like there is this influence throughout the journey of like the negative pole, but also the positive pole, and that's kind of like both. And there's different influences kind of like trying to pull you into different directions. But kind of what needs to happen is that you just need to stay on the path and just fulfill your fucking purpose, and not be too influenced by it. Even though, like, personally, the Gold Mask's influence is, I kind of feel like is a good influence. And I kind of personally feel like that's the best ending. Even though the default ending is I guess, a kind of good ending too, in some sense. Even though the Frenzied Flame ending, or I think there's another ending with the rotting flesh or something along those lines, and some other endings that are quite dark and are kind of different aspects of, like, I guess the if we would speak of a person, the nihilism, depression, or whatever, like different negative aspects that one would give into, kind of, and to um, yeah, kind of harm the self, or be like kind of like a big fuck you to, in that regard to it all. I mean, that's a possible outcome too. It's like, but, you know, it's not something that in the sense of individuation is something to be encouraged though, because like it's, you know, you would want to like connect to both anima and the self in a proper manner, so you align yourself with that, or the grace, the life force energy, and you properly connected to it. And like in my dream, basically, I guess, shoot the negative anima in the face and be like, fuck you, I'm not gonna let you suck the energy away and go with you away somewhere, and lose, I guess, that I guess agency within the mind, somewhere beyond. So yeah, but that's kind of like what I wanted to say about about Elden Ring. If there's anything that's like unclear about it, or you want to like have explained a bit better, or something, if there's something like that, if it's unclear, just leave me a comment in the video. Just leave me a comment below, and I can answer anything with regards to that, or just join the Fox then, because in the server there's like other people too that that could help explain certain aspects, or like, well, I could in that sense. Also, when it comes to dreams and different things with that regards. So yeah. And also, like, yeah, Maktera's video, I'll leave it in the description too, because I do think it adds like a mythological layer on top of it too, and I really love seeing such like Norse mythological layers being put over it, because I'm a sucker for mythology. I just am. So yeah. Okay. Well, I would say see you later in another video. Yeah. Okay. Bye bye.